right, guys, we are continuing on. Now that I've done an overview here, there's a lot of things that I need to do in here to really help the woods. And you want to do this because if you're working on bigger, healthier deer, when you do these food plots, you've only got one piece of the puzzle. So do your soil improvements and plant the right crops. You're going to really help deer, but you need the bigger picture, and that is step 2. So when you get this other piece of the puzzle going, things can change really quick for you. All right, so after doing several videos for you on how I'm evaluating the woods, this whole section that I just did a video set on gets a D-. Not even a dang C. So it gets a D-, and be honest with yourself when you're doing these evaluations. If you try to pride yourself thinking your woods are better than what they are, you'll never really reach full potential here. So I give myself a near failing grade. As far as what's provided at the ground level, it gets a flat out F. There are some things here the deer can eat at ground level, but look at it during this time of year. What do you see that has value to it? Obviously, I'm not going to dig through here and try to find an acorn, but what else besides the nuts in here can provide something for the deer? The answer is nothing other than these ugly tree buds. Deer eat tree buds when they're starving. They always drop down to whatever the next best item is. So this part of the woods gets a D-. And the only reason it's slightly above the F mark is because there's a couple of oaks back in here that have a good chance to break the canopy and do really, really well. I've already got a couple of big ones here. I've got massive white oaks down through there. Those don't really count because that's not part of my surveyed area. But you need to be honest when you're doing these evaluations. And a lot of times if you're new, you're just looking at this like, well, what the heck do I do? I mean, there's so many things going on in the woods. There's so many different species. You may know what to cut, what not to cut. I think for a lot of people, this is just a simple process of what I'm showing you. Focus on oak tree health. And you can make your cuts and plans based on where you find the trees and what situation they're in. So let's go down here to the corner. This is so I can at least cover both situations here. Anytime you come up to a field line right here, any oak trees that tend to grow along field edges tend to be extremely large trees. The reason being is because of sheer space those trees are allowed to grow into. These limbs are so big and so long now, they're almost touching the ground out here. And I'm going to have to cut some of that back just so we can get the tractor under there again. But that tree has an absolute massive canopy. Can you imagine how many acorns a tree that size can produce? I mean, you're looking at 5,000 to 6,000 nuts easy on a tree that massive. So you got to think in the long term of and trees and situations like this, when you're trying to increase deer population, there's pieces to the puzzle that you need to put together in order for this to work. So I've got piece number 1. The big problem was lack of food. I have addressed that when I started building food plots. I have really helped a lot with the shortcomings of what the woods here provide. And because the ground is so poor, because of my crop rotations, the soil's gotten better, and the first piece of that puzzle is looking like it's in much better shape to really help the deer. So now we got to get to the next piece of the puzzle. And this is in most cases, there might be a lot of you, this is basically all you got to hunt. And you really can help your deer if you would focus on making improvements in your woods. So over here, we've got a field edge. And if I was walking through your woods, come up on this field edge right here, There's a few things that I'm going to notice right off the bat. You've got a beech tree right here and a cedar tree basically hugging this tree. Get rid of that cedar tree. It's no good. It's hampering your beech tree. It can produce nuts for the deer, and this tree is basically weaved all up in it, so it's not a very good situation to see. It may be to the point to where both trees might need to be removed and start over with something else. Out here we've got smilax plants growing in here, which is all these thistle looking briars right here. And the more leaves they eat off of that, the worse your food supply is. Well, guess what? There's not a single leaf on them. All gone. All the ends are eaten off. I mean, they have been going to town on it. So if I'm still going over here doing an evaluation, oh, here's you a promising tree. Here's you a white oak. Nice, fairly straight tree, but do you see the problem? This tree right here needs to go. This tree will never reach full production as long as this tree is here. And then of course, as the tree gets bigger, you're going to start running into other trees trying to block this oak. But this is a huge problem with this tree. Obviously, it may not kill the tree. I'm not talking like it's so bad that the tree could die. It's still possible. But you got to remember, if you think of this as a competition, a war of nutrition. So if this tree beats this white oak and kills this white oak off, you've got to make up for thousands of missing acorns somewhere else. And that affects your deer herd. Now, if this white oak wins the battle and this tree dies, then you gain food. That's the battle that you're after. You're always looking for ways to gain food in your woods. So this tree is an extremely high candidate, a must-go tree. And I'll get rid of that one here when I start the projects up. Down here, this is just my opinion on this. This is up to you how you would want to handle this. You've got a white oak growing here and a much bigger looking red oak growing here. The reason it's bigger, it's just because it's had field space. There's nothing in the way. In the wood setting, a lot of these limbs here would be dead and you'd have a really small, skinny top. That's why that tree is so fat. These trees could actually be the same age. So if you want to leave one, it's up to you on which one you want to keep. I'm just going to leave them as is and just let them take care of themselves here. Because I have a feeling what's going to happen over time is this red oak is going to fall into the category of this big one where it's just going to start leaning. If it does that, that white oak can grow right over the top of it. If something like that was to happen. Then beside it, you need to look around it. I would always like to look at the first 10 yards, do a 10-yard circumference around the tree. The bigger the tree, the bigger circumference needs to be. So as general for young trees, do your evaluation around 10 yards, remove whatever junk trees you can afford to remove, which is sassafrasses, sweet gums, cedar trees, pine trees. You want this oak tree to have the space. You don't want something in the way. Over here, I've got another white oak right here, and it would have a lot of space if it wasn't for this princess tree. And guess what? That's well within my 10-yard buffer. That tree would need to go, that tree needs to go, and that tree needs to go. And then this ugly locust tree needs to go. So that takes care of this white oak. And if you can cut whatever tree you want down, I recommend cutting this maple down. All right, so let's go over here to the bigger one, just to give you an idea of what canopy spaces could be like. This is one of the, not the largest, but it's one of our largest oaks on the property. And this woods used to be full of trees like this. So this tree is approaching 3 feet in thickness. It might Might be a shade more than 3 down here coming out of the ground, but it's at chest high, it's approaching 3. So a tree this big has huge amounts of space, and I can't get all of it in the camera frame. So you have massive limbs. Imagine how many acorns a tree this size will produce. You're looking at 5,000 nuts minimum, I would think, on a good year. That's a big bumper crop of oak nuts. And it's not a white oak, but white oaks can get this big too. All right, so let's see here. This video's starting to get a little length to it. I'm going to cut it off here, and then I'm going to do the next video for this section, and we're just going to work ourselves this way, and I'm going to kind of zigzag back and forth as I continue to do these videos, looking for ways to improve this area.